Why, hello there, everyone. If you watched my general impressions video about the recently concluded Gundam Evolution PC playtest, then you'll know that I specifically refrained from sharing my opinions on the individual character balances in the game because I have enough to say about that it definitely deserved its own video. It definitely merited its own video. And I think it was at the end of the second day of the beta test, I actually went ahead and started making a tier list that early because I felt as if I knew enough at that time to start working on a tier list. And my opinions have actually not changed much since then, but still, just to be safe, I wanted to wait until the playtest had actually concluded before I put my tier list in a video format. But like I said, my opinions haven't changed much, actually, so if you follow me on Twitter, you probably already know what this tier list is going to look like. And for context, the playtest was conducted over the 7th to the 12th, which was about 4 days, and I played the playtest for a bit over 30 hours. So 30 plus hours, a little over 30 hours of playtime is definitely, relatively speaking, not that much playtime. Like, that's definitely not enough playtime to have a really well-educated opinion on a game's balance, but considering the playtest was only available for about 4 days, having 30 plus hours is about as much expertise as someone can reasonably get. So I do consider myself in the top percentile of people that can definitively talk about this game's balance. But I would like to lead by talking about the best characters, or mobile suits, I should say, and then I'm going to talk about the worst characters, because generally speaking, on any kind of tier list, it's going to be a bell curve. So if it's a decent tier list, most people would agree on the top tiers and the bottom tiers, but then the middle stuff is usually where people start to disagree. Usually the middle stuff is more debatable, and I think this tier list is no exception. So let me go ahead and put on a certain mobile suit in S rank. You probably know who it is going to be already, and that is, that is Barbatos. I thought my cursor was on the right monitor, but it was actually on the recording software. But now the mouse is actually on. So Barbatos is obviously the best in the game. If you played the game yourself, you would agree with this. If you watched anybody stream the game, you probably heard them complaining about Barbatos. Barbatos is actually the only character I'm going to put in S rank, even though there are a couple other characters I think are very good. Barbatos is the only S rank because in my book, my definition of an S rank is that S ranks should be reserved for characters who single-handedly define the meta and have the entire meta of the game revolve around them. And Barbatos here is a textbook example of an S rank, of an S tier, so I'm keeping him there. The reason why Barbatos is so good is because he literally has a touch of death combo. If you don't play fighting games, if you're not familiar with certain fighting games have what is called a touch of death combo, and that is a combo which can take an opponent from 100% HP down to 0, assuming you don't drop the combo. So Barbatos has this area of effect, this AoE stun, which he can use to start this combo, this stun lock combo, and bring any suit in the game from 100 to 0. And the reason why that's so oppressive is that, one, the AoE is huge. He can literally get an entire team in this stun lock combo if they're huddled up close enough together. Obviously, a team shouldn't be super huddled together, but multiple times I've seen Barbatos get 3 to 4 people in this attack, and they weren't even that close together, and it's just because the AoE is so comedically big. So my first suggestion is that they need to shrink the AoE of that stun move a little bit. So that way he has to actually work a bit harder to actually get the move to connect on more than one opponent, right? Even though that's not necessarily in his control, I just don't think that the AoE should be that big. Secondly, what's ridiculous about this Touch of Death Stunlock combo is that not only does it bring you from 100 to 0, but it explodes you as well. So in this game, when you run out of HP, you actually get downed, and when you're downed, you have an opportunity to be revived by an ally, or an opponent can shoot you to finish you off, because when you're downed, you get this secondary HP bar, which is decaying, and then obviously your time in which you can be revived can be shortened if an opponent shoots you. So my second suggestion is that Barbatos' AoE stunlock combo should only down an opponent, not actually explode them. I bet a lot of people are probably calling for and demanding much harsher nerfs, but honestly, because Barbatos is a melee-only suit and because he's such a glass cannon, I acknowledge that this is probably the most difficult mobile suit to balance in the whole game, which is understandably why he probably ended up being the strongest. Because if you were to nerf his AoE stunlock combo into no longer being a touch of death combo, he would lose his assassination potential. He would no longer be able to run up, sneak behind someone, and then blow them up. He would no longer be able to assassinate the backline. And as soon as that happens, he would just dive in and then get shot and die. If you made it where you couldn't assassinate someone, he would literally just run in and int. He would run in and get shot. So that would be terrible, right? So again, I acknowledge that he is the most fragile character in the game to balance. That would be the most difficult one to balance. So I expect a lot of people are going to be calling for really harsh nerfs. They should say, oh, half his damage, stuff like that. Oh, he shouldn't be allowed to one-touch kill you. I think the one-touch kill is fine. It's just that if you get comboed by Barbatos and then your team finishes him off, you should be able to get revived, right? And I actually think this would be a very healthy nerf when you consider the fact that even if he's able to still bring an opponent from 100 to 0, even if he's still able to stunlock multiple opponents in the same combo and bring them all to 100 to 0, if the Barbatos knows that he dives and goes crazy and tries to do this touch of death combo on at least one opponent, if he knows that doing that will allow the opponent to be revived after he gets shot himself, then it'll increase the opportunity cost, and I think Barbatos will go for those stupid, crazy dives a lot less often if they know that the opponents that they just blew up are going to get revived, and then the Barbatos is then going to have to wait on a respawn. The Barbatos would no longer win those trades, right? Because even if, in the playtest, you would see these Barbatoses going for all these crazy dives because they know that even if they end up dying, even if they can't escape once they dive into the backline, if they can take out at least one enemy mobile suit, they break even because they're going to explode them, right? So if you actually make it where the opponent only gets downed instead of instantly explodes as Barbatos, I think that will force Barbatos players to actually consider their dives a lot more. Okay, I knew that one was going to take a lot of time to talk about, but that is obviously the biggest hot topic about the game in terms of the game's balance, right? Everybody has an opinion on Barbatos. Pretty much everyone unanimously agrees he is too good. But I could totally see Barbatos players complaining a lot if they nerf him to the ground. So I really don't want them to nerf him to the ground. Again, he's a glass cannon, so he should still do damage, right? He's a melee-only suit in a game that's full of ranged attackers. So he should still be good. So now, like I said, I want to include the worst ones. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 left because there were 14 in the game. And I'm going to actually put 2 characters in the D tier. First one I want to put here is Turn A Gundam. So I actually really like the Turn A's kit. I think it's really fun. And as a grappler main in fighting games, I really do enjoy the judo throw. The only issue with this is that even though the kit is well designed, everything is just super undertuned, and the throw needs to be buffed in every regard. So the judo throw, its active frames need to start up immediately. So in the playtest, when you activate the judo throw, it actually takes about a second before it starts up. It takes about a second before you can even move. So the judo throw needs to start instantly to make melee suits actually afraid of approaching him, first of all. Not only does it need to start up sooner, but the active frames need to actually last longer. Because in the playtest, you would press the button, or you would press the key, and then you would have to wait a second, and then he would enter this judo throw stance, and he would automatically walk forward, but it would only last for about 1 to 2 seconds, and you would barely move forward at all. And then when the active frames run out, he does this whiff animation. He does a whiffed throw animation, and then he's just left out to dry, and then he gets shot up. Or if he's trying to grab a melee suit, they can just whiff punish him, and he gets blown up. So they need to make it start up immediately, they need to make it last longer, and they could also make it a bit easier to control while he's automatically moving as well. His other ability is a heal, but it's not like an instant heal. It's not like the Gym's health grenade in that it heals you instantly. The Turn-A's heal is more like a Diablo potion because it's a heal over time. So that automatically makes it more difficult to use because you have to think more about when you're going to use it. So because it's a heal over time, you actually have to use it more preemptively. For example, you might want to use it before you go into a fight because you know that you're going to get hurt, right? So because it is inherently more difficult to use than an instant heal like the GM health grenade, they really need to just make the heal stronger, or they need to make the heal last longer to offset to make it worth it being harder to use, right? Because as it stands right now, it is just outclassed by all the other heals in the game. So if it's going to be harder to use and if it requires more brain power to use, its efficacy should actually be consistent with that, right? And its main attack, the beam rifle shots, if they obviously want you to play the Turn-A much more methodically and defensively than other suits. So when you're using the beam rifle as Turn-A, when you're looking down the sights, it charges up, and they want you to obviously land very precise shots because it's a very narrow shot, and you're not going to be just spraying and praying with it. You're going to be firing very deliberate, very precise shots because you have to wait for the beam to charge up if you want to do as much damage as possible, if you actually want to take advantage of the Turn-A's full potential, right? So they really just need to increase the damage so that way the player gets a bigger reward when they're landing these precise shots after waiting for it to charge up all the time. Because otherwise they could just pick the Gundam or the Gym if they just want to spam beam shots, right? So that is Turn-A Gundam. I really like his kit, but he needs to be buffed in every regard. And I consider him to be the worst in the game, although the Marasai is debatably just as bad as the Turn-A Gundam. So first of all, this doesn't have anything to do with the balance, but I just have to bring this up. I don't know why they decided to have the Marasai be the hook character if they could have added a goof, right? So if they wanted a hook character, they could have added a goof and he could have used those metal tentacles as the hook. And then after pulling them in with the tentacles, Goof's combo could be the heat sword, right? Like you pull them in with the metal tentacles, and then you do the heat sword, like you stab it in on top of them like in 8th MS team. And then maybe after the heat sword and they get knocked away, you could use the minigun, right? That would be a really cool kit, and I could imagine that would have some synergy, right? Plus the goof is just very iconic. So I have no idea why they decided to make the Marasai the hook character. I expect the goof is going to get into the game eventually, so when they finally add the goof, I'm really curious what kind of archetype they have in mind for him if he's not going to be a hook character. But anyway, just talking about what we do have, the Marasai, the issue with it is that, first of all, its hook is so bad. When you activate the hook, it doesn't actually come out until about a second later. So, first of all, they need to make that hook come out instantly upon activation. They need to make the active frames instant. They need to make the hook actually launch and fire at where you're aiming when you press the key. Not only that, but they need to increase the hitbox as well, because that hitbox is tiny. It is so hard to hit things. Even when you successfully preemptively press the key and aim it at an opponent and it fires at them, it rarely ever grabs them. So the hook needs to be buffed in every regard. I rarely ever got grabbed by a Marasai when I was fighting one. Not only that, but you do not get enough from the hook to make it worth landing. In other words, it is way too hard to land for what you get from it. I think that's a better way to say it. Because after you land a hook, once you finally land a hook, once in a blue moon, there's not really much you can do to capitalize off it if you don't have G maneuver, if you don't have his ult. So the Marasai's ult is this stun. It's sort of an AoE stun. It's sort of like a cone in front of itself. So you can aim it, but it's pretty much just an AoE in front of yourself. And it felt as if you could cancel into the ult after you land a hook. So if you have the ult, the combo seemed to be hook, ult, shoot, and then spear, and then shoot again. Yeah. Hook, ult, shoot, spear, shoot again. And that seemed to be his main combo, right? But like I said, if you don't have the ult, you just really could not do much after it, because I think what the designers had in mind is that after landing a hook, you could just do a spear and then shoot them. The issue is that when you do the spear, it actually knocks them back. And that would be fine. It would be fine if the spear did enough damage, right? But in the game, when you do the hook and then you do the spear, it doesn't really do that much damage, and then it knocks them away. And you just let them go, right? It's really weird, because just drawing comparisons to Overwatch, Roadhog is Overwatch's resident hook character, and Roadhog's kit makes so much more sense because Roadhog has a shotgun, which has obvious synergy coupled with the hook, because after you pull them in with the hook as Roadhog, you are in point-blank range for the shotgun, where you can get maximum damage with the shotgun. So you would do hook, shotgun, melee, right? At least on the patches where the shotgun wouldn't insta-kill the squishies. So the Marasai's kit just lacks that sort of inherent synergy. Also, the spear is just really awkward to use, because when you use the spear, it locks your camera during the animation. So it's kind of difficult to land it, because you can't even auto-correct the aim. You can't correct your aim manually with the mouse after doing the spear. And it just has a really awkward hitbox. Marasai is probably the weirdest character in the whole roster in terms of his kit. Out of all the characters, Marasai feels like the black sheep, just because Marasai feels as if he is an incomplete character. I think they really need to rethink him. Anyway, so those are the two bottom tiers in my opinion. The Turn A and the Marasai. Wow, this is already 17 minutes long. I did not expect it to take that long. Okay. So I think most people are going to agree on these. I saw some people on Twitter were arguing that the Turn A is actually better than what I'm giving it credit for. But even so, even if the Turn A is better than what I'm giving it credit for, I still think that the Turn A is one of the worst in the game. Whether that means it's terrible or just mediocre, I don't think there's anything worse than the Turn A unless you're talking about the Marasai. And I think more people would agree with that than just saying the Turn A sucks in general. So now I'll do A ranks downwards. So Barbatos is an S rank, like I said. And he's the one character in the game that actually needs nerfs. But there are two other characters that are exceptionally good, but they're not meta-defining. They're not game-breaking. I just think they're extremely good, and they're effective at everything they're meant to do. And that is the Gem Sniper and the Guntank. So, first of all, Gem Sniper does so much damage. Gem Sniper can actually get one-hit kills if it gets a headshot. And there's one map, I think it was I forgot the name. But there's this one map, I was going to say the name, but I'd rather just not say it in case I'm misremembering. But you'll know what I'm talking about if you played it, because I'm about to describe it. So, the one map that has the capture point kind of out in the open by that one little plateau, because every single time you played that map, there would be a Gem Sniper on that little plateau, and he would have complete overwatch of the entire first area, and he would just lock down the whole first area so hard, and it would be so oppressive, and it was so scary to walk out because he would just headshot you. It's really weird, because canonically speaking, the headshots shouldn't be that big of a deal, because aside from the Sazabi, all of these mobile suits have their cockpits in their chest or abdomen. So if these mobile suits got the heads shot off, shot off, it would just disable the main camera, but it wouldn't be an insta-kill. So that's really weird. I can kind of understand from a gameplay design standpoint why they have headshots, critical hits, why they have the headshots serving as the critical hits, just because they probably know a lot of other FPS players are going to play this with no knowledge of Gundam, and they are probably intuitively going to assume that headshots equal critical hits. So from a game design standpoint, that makes sense, but honestly, I would prefer if instead of headshots, they just had it so that each mobile suit has its own unique weak point. I think that would be more interesting, but obviously that would make the game a bit more esoteric and less pick up and play, so maybe they already considered that. But the Sazabi is the one suit that actually has a cockpit on the head, so if they did do that, the Sazabi could still have its head as the weak point. Anyways, just from a gameplay design standpoint, Jim is very good, just because of how much damage the sniper rifle does. Obviously, his Vulcans and his jump pad are pretty okay as well, but the reason why he's A rank is just because he does so much damage. Guntank is the other A rank, just because everything in the Guntank's kit works so effectively, and he ends up doing so much damage. There was only one place where the Guntank didn't feel too good, and coincidentally, that is the same part of the same map that I was just describing, where the Jim had pretty oppressive control, because enemies are firing at each other. Opponents are firing at you from so far away on that part of the map that the Guntank is outranged, and then you have people like the Jim Sniper sniping you. So on that map, I would always pick the Jim so I could have a shield to protect against the Jim Sniper. But outside of that one part of that one map, the Guntank is so good because if he's using his regular fire, he can... First of all, you don't even have to aim, so he's so easy to use, right? And if you're close enough, you can fire at multiple enemies at once, but even if they're further away, you can just hold right-click when you're firing, and it would do more damage, and it would let you lock on from farther away. The cannons are pretty good. And another thing that makes him actually pretty decent is that, unlike a lot of the other suits, the Guntank actually has a chance of surviving when a Barbatos or an Exia tries to dive him, because the Guntank has this tackle ability, and you can actually cancel it early, and if you cancel it early, the Guntank will do this attack, which knocks them back. So it was actually not too uncommon that I would be able to either get away from a Barbatos or an Exia, or just straight up beat them in the 1v1, which is always... That was always so satisfying, because you know when those Barbatoses and Exias are trying to dive you, you know in their mind that they think they've already won, so when you actually can put up a fight, and it forces them to think, that was pretty fun. But the Jim was my favorite. But despite the Jim being my favorite, I think I actually put more playtime into the Guntank because the Guntank was just so good. Also, his ult is really fun. His ult's pretty good. I don't think the ult is what makes him super good, though. It's just the sheer amount of damage output you can get from the support fire. I would kind of like it if the Guntank's knockback / stun that's inflicted after canceling the tackle early would be extended a bit, because sometimes it seemed as if the Barbatos or the Exia barely got interrupted at all after I knocked them back. I thought it was supposed to be a stun at first, but it seemed to be a bit more of a knockback because it never really stunned them per se. So I would suggest that they make that a bit better, so that way the Guntank can have a bit more survivability if he gets dived by a Barbatos, but the Guntank's already so good, I don't know if he needs that. So, Jim Sniper and Guntank, super, super good. They are probably the best two in the game aside from Barbatos. Once they nerf Barbatos a bit, Barbatos will probably go down to A rank. I mean, unless they nerf him to the ground, right? But if they nerf Barbatos in the way that I hope they nerf Barbatos, Barbatos will go to A rank, and then he will be on par with the Guntank and the Jim Sniper. So now we're on B rank, which includes the most mobile suits on my own personal tier list here. So I'm just going to place them, and then I'm going to describe it. So we have Sazabi, we have RX-78, we have the regular old Jim, we have the Exia, the Methis, and the Asimar. Well, I guess that spoils C rank because that's the only thing left, but I'll get to that. So, The Sazabi is here. I think the Sazabi is actually just decent. I don't think the Sazabi is particularly great by any means by himself, but the Sazabi's role on a team, the Sazabi's archetype, is so important that I think every team should have one. Even though he himself individually is not that great in a vacuum, I think every team would want a Sazabi. And I had to sort of go back and forth between whether I thought the Gym or the Sazabi served the role of the tank better. And even though the regular old GM is more self-sufficient in that it has a knockback, because the knockback is obviously super helpful against melee suits like Barbatos and Exio when they try to dive you, and the regular GM has a health grenade so he can heal himself or allies. The one reason why I think Sazabi is better than the Gym, despite being less self-sufficient, is that the Sazabi just does so much damage up close. So the Sazabi has the spread beam, right? Like the beam shotgun. So if anybody gets close to the Sazabi, they're getting chunked. And that is why I think the Sazabi is more important to have on a team, even though I like playing the regular Gym more. And that is because when you're playing as the Sazabi, he feels way more team-reliant than the Gym. Because, like I already alluded to, the Sazabi does not have a get-off-me tool. He has the shotgun, but he doesn't have a quick get-off-me tool. So if a Barbatos dives him, you're pretty much screwed, especially if you're holding your shield out. Well, I mean, that's also true for the Gym. If you're holding your shield out, Barbatos can instant crush shields. But as the Gym, you're able to sort of jump and kite back, and then if you're able to catch the Barbatos whiffing something, you can dash in and use the shield bash. And what's cool with the shield bash on the Gym is that if you just use the shield bash while standing still, it moves you just barely forward a little bit. But if you tap the shift key while holding forward and you do this quick boost dash forward and then you press the shield bash, you actually keep some of your momentum from the boost dash and you go sliding forward. So the GM had better self-peel, but like I said, the Sazabi just does too much damage. I think the Sazabi is more important, and at high-level play, the Sazabi will be more sought after than the Gym. What's weird is that, and also, like, you feel kind of team-reliant, and that you're just hoping that your team is watching the flanks, because if you're playing the Sazabi, you have to kind of be in the middle of everything, and you have to be out in the front, and so if you get flanked, you're not going to really be able to control that either, because if you get flanked and you have to point your shield on the flanks, you're then exposing yourself to the main fire, presumably. So that's why I didn't like playing the Sazabi very much. He just felt way too team-reliant. I thought the Sazabi was going to be my favorite just because I really like the Sazabi's design, and I mained the Sazabi in Gundam Versus. But in this game, he just feels way too team-reliant. I think he's already really, really well balanced, but I have to say, his one ability, which is basically just X-ray vision, I don't know why, but for some reason they gave Sazabi an X-ray vision thing, which is basically an inferior version of the Gym Sniper's ult. I would have much preferred if they gave him a melee kick, because, first of all, that would have been more referential to source material, right? Char loves doing his kicks, right? But second of all, that would have given the Sazabi a way to deal with melee suits when they try to dive him. That would have given him much more of a fighting chance to fight off a Barbatos or an Exia if he successfully dodges the first hit of that AoE stun and doesn't get his shield absolutely crushed. So that is the Sazabi. I think he's pretty well balanced. From a gameplay design standpoint, the X-ray vision thing is fine. It's just that as a Gundam fan, I would have much preferred to see him do a kick, because it is Char's suit, right? The Sazabi is basically a reflection of Char as he is in Char's counterattack. Char is basically finishing his character arc by the time of Char's counterattack, and the Sazabi is basically like Neo Zeon incarnate / Char Aznable incarnate, or like a mobile suit version of Char's psyche. And so having it kick would just be really cool. Anyways, this video is supposed to be more about the actual game balance, so I'm not going to talk too much about source material. So I pretty much already talked about the Jim, right? The Jim is a good tank as well. He's more self-sufficient than the Sazabi, which is why I like him more. But the big trade-off is that the Jim just does way less damage than the Sazabi, because the Sazabi shotgun does so much damage up close. The one thing I think they need to buff on the Jim is his C4. His C4 is pretty good, but honestly, the C4 needs to detonate immediately upon activation, because as it stands right now, during the playtest, it was not possible to detonate the C4 upon reaction if there were an opponent... if an opponent were to walk over it or walk near it, because sometimes you'd set up a C4 and then you would see an opponent walk over or walk near it, and you would try to detonate it to hit them, but there was a delay when you activated the C4, and so the C4 would always seem to detonate a bit too late. So honestly, they really need to make the C4 detonate immediately upon activation, because you're already having to either watch the C4 and detonate it upon reaction, or you're not watching the C4, in which you're already having to make a hard read, right? So they don't need to delay it and make it even harder, because it's not like a mine that detonates as soon as someone walks over, and it's not like a grenade that explodes shortly after throwing it. There's already an inherent difficulty in actually getting the C4 to hurt someone. So that's the one suggestion I have about the GM. Just make it where the C4 detonates immediately, and I think the GM's perfect for what it is. Okay, Gundam. I wanted to talk about these in order, but when I was talking about the Sazabi, I was comparing him to the GM, so that's why I skipped the RX-78. But the RX-78 Gundam is kind of weird, because I think he's very good. I think he's pretty good, right? I think he's decent, but his kit does not have much synergy at all. It's really weird. The RX-78 has a shield, like the Sazabi and the Jim, but the RX-78 is unable to fire while shielding, so you can only really use the shield when you are backing up and retreating, or if you want to walk forward and get behind cover. It doesn't have much use. Obviously, if you can't fire while shielding, it is just sort of there, and you just use it every now and then. But you can't really use it in sync with the rest of your abilities, right? But the one reason why I think, or the two reasons why I think he is going to be good at high-level play is because of his ability to instantly break shields, and also because of his ult, and the ult's potential to force everybody off of an objective. So at a casual level, I don't think the RX-78 is that good, especially because his kit doesn't have much synergy, but purely due to the fact that he can break shields and force opponents off of objectives, I think that is going to give him a lot of value at high-level play when you have a full pre-made team coordinating with each other. So the thing that allows him to break shields is his Hyper Hammer. When I watched the beta footage from the Japanese gameplay, or when I watched the Japanese beta footage, and I watched the Hyper Hammer, I always assumed that the Hyper Hammer was a melee attack, but it's actually not. He launches the Hyper Hammer, and obviously it can do damage in its own right, but the main way you want to use it is to use it on shields, because if you hit a shield with the Hyper Hammer, it instantly breaks it. And like I said, Sazabi is something that should be on every team. So if the meta includes a Sazabi on every team, then the RX-78 would be the perfect anti-meta, right? The perfect counter to the Sazabi to break the shield instantly. And his ult is a bomb. If somebody knows what the RX-78 ult is a reference to, please let me know, because I kept trying to figure it out, but I have no idea where they got the idea of the RX-78 just chucking a bomb. Maybe it's from that one episode when Amuro had to get those explosives off of the RX-78, but I don't remember the RX-78 ever having to throw it and then it detonating. I was thinking also maybe it's that one episode where he had to separate the explosive warhead off of the propellant from that one missile, that missile with the warhead on it. But he never threw it and had it explode either. So if anybody recalls what that is referencing, please let me know, because that was driving me crazy during the whole playtest. But you can fire at it and destroy it before it detonates. So Obviously, if an RX-78 just chucks his ult out there, the enemy team, if they react well enough and if they aim well enough, they can destroy it before it detonates. But even so, I think that if you are playing at high level, you're not just going to throw out the ult randomly, right? You are going to throw out the ult if you know that they can't fire at it. Like maybe your teammates are keeping them busy, right? They have suppression fire, so you know that they won't be able to deal with the ult easily. Or maybe you're just chucking the ult behind a box or something where they won't be able to have a line of sight to fire at it. So I think the RX-78 ult is going to automatically make him a high-value character. My suggestion, though, in order to make his kit feel a lot better and to have more synergy and just to make the character make more sense overall, is that, remember how I said the Hyper Hammer looked like a melee attack? The whole time I was thinking the Hyper Hammer was a melee attack. Because before the Hyper Hammer, before the actual spike ball gets launched, which is the thing that destroys shields, he swings it. There are two parts of the animation. He swings the Hyper Hammer as if he's using it like a flail, and then he shoots out the spike ball. The whole time, I thought that the swing part was a melee attack, but lo and behold, it is not. So my suggestion is that they should add a melee hitbox to the first part of the Hyper Hammer's animation, and that would automatically give his kit so much more synergy, because the RX-78 is a mid-range fighter. He's really good at mid-range. That's where you want your opponents to be when you're playing as the RX-78. He has a beam rifle with, I think it has 0 drop-off. It has 0 accuracy loss if you're looking down the sights with it, and I don't think there's any damage drop-off either. So you can hit opponents and do a pretty good amount of damage from mid-range. So if you could use the Hyper Hammer to knock an enemy back before the spike ball got launched, it would knock them right where you want them to be as RX-78, right? It would knock them from close range into mid-range. That would be perfect. That would automatically make his whole kit make more sense. I really hope they do that. And again, not only would it just make it make more sense, not only would it just make more sense that way, but it would also feel a lot better, because it's so weird that the Hyper Hammer is not a melee weapon, especially considering that the Hyper Hammer was used as a melee weapon in the show. That's what it is. It's a big flail. It's a spike ball, right? So now we're on the Exia. Exia, like the Barbatos, is a melee suit. The Barbatos and the Exia are the two melee suits in the game. However, the Exia's main fire is a ranged attack. So unlike the Barbatos, the Exia is not a pure melee suit. Barbatos is pure melee, whereas Exia is primarily melee, but can still fire a ranged attack. I didn't play the Exia that much. My brother played the Exia more than me, but we both agree that Exia actually feels pretty nice. Exia, to a lot of people, probably felt underpowered when they were playing as it in the playtest, but that is just because the Barbatos outclasses the Exia so hard, but that is just because Barbatos was broken, right? So once they balance the Barbatos, once they nerf Barbatos and make him more balanced, Exia will probably be a lot more comparable to Barbatos, and there won't just be one super obviously better melee suit. Because in the playtest, Barbatos was the better suit to play if you wanted to do melee, right? But Exia's kit's pretty good. He's basically just Genji from Overwatch. Barbatos is more about... Barbatos feels more brutish, whereas Exia feels more ninja-like, right? I think that's the archetype they were going for. I think Exia is just fine where he is. I don't think they need to change it. Methys is pretty good just because it is the best healer in the game. That's why I have it here in B rank along with the other B ranks. The one thing about it they should change is that I think they should increase the range of the healing tether a bit more. And they should also add a little bit of leniency when the ally connected to the healing tether breaks line of sight by going around a corner. Obviously, you can still have the healing tether break when line of sight is broken, but there needs to be a little bit of leniency, because sometimes it felt as if an ally just barely going around a tiny little corner just barely instantly broke the tether, and then it was really annoying to get it back on. The reason why I say the healing range, the effective range of the healing tether should be increased is because the main mobile suits you should be healing and buffing as the Methys are the melee suits. If you have a Barbatos or an Exia on your team, those are the suits you should have the healing tether connected to, right? Because they want to go ham, they want to go monkey, they want to dive in, and so if you heal them and make it where they can't just get blown up, then it lets them go to town, right? And so with the Barbatos and the Exia having so much mobility and being so fast, it's sometimes hard to keep up with them as the Methys, and then they run so far ahead of you that the healing tether breaks. Methys does have a flight, and I think maybe they want you to use the flight to keep up, but using the flight to keep up with suits that are just using a dash ability, it's not really the same thing, and it's kind of awkward. So I think the Methys is pretty good. It's automatically good just because it's the best healer in the game, but I think they need to make it feel a little bit more user-friendly when you're actually playing it. After the Methys is the other flying suit in the game. That's the Aasimar. So the Methys and the Aasimar are the two flying suits in the game. They both have a fight mode. And I think the Aasimar is decent. I think the Aasimar is okay. It does what it's supposed to do. Also, the Aasimar has the best grenade in the game. It's this big incendiary grenade. I think all the other grenades in the game should have the same AoE that this grenade has. But as it stood in the playtest, Aasimar's grenade was by far the best grenade. What's really weird is that it looks like an incendiary grenade. Aasimar's grenade and the Gundam's ult, the RX-78-2's ult, the explosion just looks like a bunch of fire, which is kind of dumb, because if it were just fire, if these were just incendiary explosions, they shouldn't be hurting the mobile suits at all, because mobile suits, you know, they're just these big robot suits. They shouldn't be affected by fire at all, especially since these things can go into space and go underwater. I'm thinking maybe they're supposed to actually be understood as literal explosions, but maybe visually maybe visually an explosion would be a bit too obstructive and it would be too hard to see through it. So maybe you're supposed to just see fire so that way you can more easily see through it. Obviously, this doesn't have anything to do with the game balance. I just thought it was weird that all of this transparent fire was going around when those things shouldn't be hurting these big mechs at all. I would much prefer to see actual explosions, but like I said, maybe they considered that, and maybe they thought that would be too obstructive in players' vision. Anyways, the reason why I have Aasimar at the end of this, like, I definitely think Aasimar is decent, and it works as intended, which is why I have it on here, but the reason why I think the Aasimar is the worst of the B tier is because he's kind of hard to use. Doing the flight mode effectively, I think they want you to use flight mode to backline, and then you can do some damage, and then when the flight mode is back off cooldown, you can get out. Maybe you're just supposed to use it to hit and run. I think that's how they want you to use Aasimar. But the thing is, it is so dangerous to go into fight mode, because as soon as you go in the air and you go out of cover, you are getting shot up, especially because the Gem Sniper is so effective, especially because the Guntank doesn't even have to aim in order to hit you. You are getting lit up whenever you fly. So it felt really difficult to find good opportunities to actually fly up. When I was playing the Aasimar, the main reason I flew up was to just go up high enough to chuck the grenade down, and then I would try to quickly fall fast enough and land behind cover fast enough before I lost all of my HP. Also, the one change they need to make to him, they need to do something about the third-person view when you enter fight mode, because the game's an Overwatch clone, so it's obviously a first-person shooter, right? But for the Methys and the Aasimar, when you enter fight mode, it goes into a third-person mode, and you can still fire. But it's incredibly awkward, especially for the Aasimar, because when you're trying to fire at things in this third-person fight mode, the mobile suit itself is obstructing your vision. You can't see what you're aiming at sometimes, especially if you are ascending as the Aasimar while aiming down. You literally cannot see what you're aiming at. So you're having to blindly fire to hopefully hit these opponents while they can clearly see you in the air and they have free reign to just shoot at you. It doesn't seem good. I think they need to do something about the vision obstruction. I can understand why, from a visual standpoint, they made it turn into a third-person mode, but I would prefer it to stay first person, or if it's going to stay third person, maybe they could have the mobile suit not show up in the middle of the screen. Maybe they can have the mobile suit show up like lower on the screen, so that way the target reticle isn't getting overlapped by the mobile suit. But also, it just seems as if there's very little reason to fly in the game in general, so maybe the fight suits are just going to be inherently difficult to use in that regard. But I think everything about the Asimar's kit and his damage and his numbers and everything is well balanced. It's just that he's hard to use and you literally can't see what you're aiming at when flying. So now we have C tier. I already spoiled what's in C tier since I filled up B tier all at once. And I've kind of gone back and forth. I've gone back and forth on the order of the things in C rank. So I'm not super solidified on this, but I'm going to say Dom, Zaku, Pale Rider. I could see myself changing my opinion on these, though. I think the Dom is actually pretty okay. Dom's a pretty decent support. The Dom can give armor to allies. It's not nearly as good as healing allies, like with the Jim's health grenade or with the Methis healing tether, because when you give them the armor decays, so you have to sort of use it preemptively, whereas if you heal someone, that's good whenever. The mines are pretty decent too, especially for holding points. I think the one thing that the Dom needs in order to be buffed into B tier or above is that the rockets need to have bigger splash damage, because the rockets in the playtest barely had any splash damage at all, and so it seemed as if it was completely missing the point of playing a character with rockets, right? Because if you're playing Overwatch and you're playing Pharah, who has a rocket launcher, the whole point of the rockets is that you can get splash damage, right? There was very little opportunity to actually hit opponents with splash damage as the Dom. So I think they just need to significantly increase said splash damage, and then it will feel as if the Dom is operating as intended. It'll actually feel like he is a rocket character, and that would automatically put him in B tier. That's the one thing that he needs. Other than that, I think he's a pretty decent support. For some reason, there weren't many people playing him. I really wonder why, because I think he's really fun, especially because you can skate around. It really does feel as if you're skating as the Dom. I'm really glad they added that bit. After the Dom is the Zaku. I actually think the Zaku has a very fun and well-designed kit. The one thing that's holding him back big time is that he runs out of ammo so quickly. He only gets 30 rounds in his machine gun, and it has such a high rate of fire, so you're constantly having to reload, and it's so annoying because his smoke screen is really good, by the way. His smoke screen is one of the best abilities in the game because the smoke screen makes it where you are completely invulnerable. So they want you to play the Zaku as a flanker, right? You kind of play Zaku as... You play the Zaku in this game similar to how you play Tracer in Overwatch. So you're supposed to flank with the Zaku and harass the enemy team while flanking, and then as soon as they turn their aggro on you, you're supposed to use the smoke screen to get out of there. Because you actually have 3 dashes as the Zaku, so if you activate smoke screen and then dash out, you can pretty much get out of anything. Kind of similar to how when you're playing Tracer, you're supposed to flank, and then when they turn their aggro on you, you do the time rewind thing, and then you zip out of there. But like I said, the one issue is that you're always running out of ammo. So even if you get a good flank and you're able to just unload on them, you always, it feels as if you always run out of ammo right before you can finish a kill. It's so annoying. Like, they always get away with just a little bit of HP because you couldn't finish them off before having to reload. And then you have to reload, and then by the time you reload, they're gone. The reload animation is pretty cool, by the way. I like the reload animation when the Zaku kind of hits the drum to get it actually connected to the machine gun well enough. He takes the drum off, and then he puts it back on and kind of hammer fists it on. Speaking of his kit, speaking of his grenade, I was going to say speaking of his grenade, but I realized I actually haven't talked about his grenade yet. Speaking of his other abilities, I should say, his grenade is decent, but like I already said, I'm pretty sure I already said earlier in the video, grenades need to be buffed in general. The only grenade that actually feels like a grenade is the Asimar grenade, but the Zaku grenades and the Pale Rider's grenades, which I will soon talk about, the AoE is so small, and they take a little bit too long to detonate. It's extremely hard to actually hit someone with the grenade, and even when you do, it doesn't do that much damage, so I think grenades need to be buffed across the board. not just for an individual character. So the main thing is that the Zaku just needs to have more ammo. He has 30 rounds. Maybe they should increase it to 50. I would say they should double it, but maybe if I'm being more realistic, they should increase it to 50, from 30 to 50. I'm really curious if there is a canonical source to confirm how many rounds a Zaku machine gun can actually hold, because one of two scenarios. The canonical amount of rounds a Zaku machine gun can hold is either more than 30, in which case that's even more reason to increase it, because why would you have it less if it feels so thin, right? If the amount of ammo feels so small. The other scenario is that it actually is canonically 30, which would explain why they gave him 30 and why it feels so bad, because you can imagine maybe they wanted to give him more ammo, but then they decided, no, we have to stick to the lore, and then they made him feel worse because of it. So regardless of how many rounds a Zaku can canonically hold, I think they need to increase it from 30 to something like 50. I'd say 60, but if I'm being negotiable, I'll say 50. Pale Rider. I already pretty much talked about the Pale Rider because Pale Rider's whole kit revolves around the grenades, and like I said, grenades in this game need to be buffed in general. He gets 2 different types of grenades, so I wish the AoE were bigger on both of them, so that way you could actually consistently hit people with it, or I just wish they could detonate sooner. Anyways, wow, that took 50 minutes. I was not expecting it to take that long, but I hope you found this interesting. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you've played this yourself, I'm sure you have your own personal tier list. I'm definitely interested to hear from you. Let me know what you thought about the character balance, and also let me know if you have any other suggestions for the individual character balance that I did not mention. Or if you agree with me, let me know, because I think I have a pretty good analysis of this, and I'm definitely hoping that they do more buffs than nerfs, because like I said, the only character that really needs nerfs is Barbatos, but then I hope they don't nerf anyone else. Turn A, Marasai, Dom, Zaku, and Pale Rider, these characters need buffs. These characters need to be buffed up to the level of B tier or A tier, and then I think the game will feel much more balanced and much more fun, because then you're going to see a bigger variety of suits actually being viable. So anyways, thanks for watching, everyone. Obviously, when the next playtest comes out, I will be playing that, and then I will make an updated video for the tier list, assuming that they did some changes, which they inevitably will do, right? So anyways, I will see you guys later, and bye for now.